Good morning, everyone. So today we have a panel of dental students, and representatives from the National Dental Examining Boards of Canada. And we'll be talking about the boards and what their mission is and so on. So before we start, I would like to ask everyone to introduce themselves. We can start from Kim.
I'm Kim Phillips. I'm the Manager of Communications with NDEB.
I'm Monique Bouchard. I'm the Coordinator for Dental Academia and Health Informatics for the CDA, and I'm also the staff representative for the Secretariat of FCDSA.
Okay. I'm Chad Giroux. I'm the Registrar of the National Dental Examining Board.
I'm Marie Dagenet. I'm the Director of Examinations for the National Dental Examining Board.
And my name is Kash Varavi. I'm the fourth-year dental student and the president of FCDSA.
My name is Ivy. I'm a fourth-year dental student as well, and I'm the vice president of the CSA.
Nada?
I'm Nada Taber, fourth-year dental student at Western, and I'm serving on the finance committee, immediate vice president of the FCDSA.
Your speaker is off.
Sorry. My name is Julie. I go to the University of Toronto. I'm in third year, and I am the Central Regional Counselor for the FCDSA and chair of the Conference Planning Committee.
Perfect. So I guess in that case, we can start the presentation. Jack, please take it over.
Well, we're pleased to try this new format and hope that everyone finds it useful. And I'm going to do some background information on the National Dental Examining Board and try to explain some of the missions and how it works. I'm then going to, do that before talking about the examinations that graduates of accredited programs will be taking. And I'm very happy to have questions in any point in the presentation and hope that this will stimulate some discussion at the end of the presentation. The National Dental Examining Board is kind of an unusual organization in that it's a regulatory board in health set up by an act of parliament, and it's federal parliament. Health is a provincial matter or provincial jurisdiction in Canada, so it only happens when the provinces ask the federal government to do something. And we have an act that's unusual, but it is similar to the Medical Council of Canada. So it was set up in 1952 to have a national approach to initial licensure exams for dentistry and similarly for medicine. And it's actually worked quite well. The mandate as defined in the Act is actually a very small act, and therefore the mandate is extremely small. It's to establish qualifying conditions for general dentists in Canada, and then it's to issue certificates to those who meet the standard. So it's a very narrow mandate. As with most organizations, the NDEB is very careful and vigilant at having strategic plans, and ours is available on our website. So we do have a mission, which you'll see is to serve the public, the regulatory authorities, and dental education institution. And those are the main stakeholders that we have, and we're careful to stay within the mandate and within our mission. The structure of the NDEB is set up by the Act of Parliament, and if you look at the top, the light gray squares, those represent the dental regulatory authorities in Canada. So there's a College of Dental Surgeons of BC, the Alberta Dental Association and College. So there are 10 dental regulatory authorities. They each appoint one member to the board, and the Commission on Dental Accreditation appoints 2 members, and that's the way the Act is set up. We also have a public representative who's not a voting member, but participates in every way except by voting. So Dr. Dagenet and I are actually senior staff employees of the National Dental Examining Board. We are not board members. The board, as many organizations has, we have a number of committees that we're allowed to set up through bylaws, and those committees are where the most of the work of the board is done. The board members themselves meet twice a year now, and your group is invited as observers to the annual meeting, which is in October every year. The financing for the board is also unique. Although we are set up by government, we receive no funding from government, so there's no revenue from taxes, and dentists in Canada do not contribute to the NDEB. The NDEB is not for profit. That's the way it's set up in the Act. All the revenues are generated from fees. So it's a user fee based financing. And we're very careful and spend a lot of time to figure out what each exam or each area that we're working in, what it costs. And we do a cost center analysis and make sure that those cost centers break even. We're trying not to make money in one area and subsidize other areas. It is budgeting, so sometimes there's small deviations, but that's the assumption and the effort that we try to do. Are there any questions on the background? No? If not, I'll give an overview of the pathways, the current pathways to certification. And I'm not going to go way back in time, but just back to 2000, which is more of the interest to you. In 2000, before 2000, there were some other ways, but in 2000, there were two streams. There were graduates of accredited programs, and at this point, the NDEB and the Commission on Dental Accreditation recognized the US accreditation as equivalent to ours. So we had graduates of Canadian and US programs taking the written and OSCE, and if they passed, they become certified and portable. And that was a very important step in becoming portable across the country. Before 2000, there actually were exams and other requirements in certain provinces. Graduates of non-accredited programs, which are essentially the rest of the world, were required to go and complete a qualifying or degree completion program. There was an admission test administered by ACFD. Once they completed the qualifying program or accredited degree completion program, they were eligible to take the written and OSCE, and then they were certified and portable. So it was exactly the same. It was a system that actually worked extremely well, but there were a couple of issues with it. And those issues became apparent in 2009 when the provinces and the federal government signed the agreement on internal trade. It's a wide-ranging agreement. It's mainly between the provinces on labor mobility and mobility of goods and services. And at that time, the provinces and the federal government came to all of the professions and trades and said, we've got to have portability across the country, which is very good public policy. They put a lot of pressure on the professions and trades to get portability, and indeed made threats that if we didn't get portability, they would get it for us. So as of 2011, the Canadian, the CDAC recognized accreditation with Australia and Ireland. So they were into the graduates of accredited programs. But graduates of non-accredited programs, instead of writing the ACFD eligibility exam, had to apply to the NDEB into what we call the equivalency process. They could use the first exam in the equivalency process as the admission test to the qualifying or degree completion program. So we were able to maintain the system and pathway that worked really well. But we were implemented the complete equivalency process, which if someone completes the equivalency process, it makes them equivalent to a graduate of an accredited program, and they can take the written and OSCE and become certified and portable. In 2012, New Zealand also came into the accredited program. Thanks. Are there any questions about that change over that time? Everyone's fairly familiar with that change?
Yeah.
Yep. So with that as background, I thought we'd give a little more in-depth information for what you guys are particularly interested in, which is the certification examinations for graduates of accredited programs. You'll have to first apply online, and for those of you that are in your last year, hopefully that's already been done. There's a fairly easy interface that allows you to register, apply and register. The written examination is normally given or people normally register for the March session. It's a one-day, 300 question, and it's pretty standard multiple choice questions, one right answer. We use clinically applied questions only. We don't have what I would call basic science trivia on it. The questions are constructed by educators, and in fact, as we speak, Kim, I think there are, what, 20, 22 people at the office writing questions this week?
We were at 16.
16?
Yeah.
It looked like a lot of people. It was oral surgeons and prosthodontists. And these questions are constructed by the educators, they're worked over by committees, and they go into our question bank. But one of the things that's most important is that the questions don't come out of the question bank and go on to an exam unless they're selected by general dentists who are appointed by the DRAs. So there are a lot of questions that educators and specialists think are very important that general dentists actually say, no, we don't know that and don't need to know that. So we do try to keep the content, it's a validity step. This is a sample question. It's more of a basic science question, but it is one of the ones that uses an example. So it's a one right answer. The pass mark or passing standard is not just let's say it should be 65 or 63. It's established through a psychometric procedure. It's called an Angoff procedure. We've done it on the written exam about 6 years ago, and we then test equate every exam back to the standard so that every exam, the pass mark is at the same difficulty level. Then we rescale things and to a standardized 75 pass score. 75 is a standard pass score. It's not a percentage pass score. The passing percentage, it varies somewhat year to year, but it's somewhere between, I would say, a low of 62 and a high near 75. It's in that range, but with the test equating, it's reported at 75. Are there any questions about that?
Yeah. So essentially, depending on the year and the performance of the students, and given taking that the boards at that age.
It's actually depending on the difficulty of the questions, not the performance.
Gotcha. So you guys like, the equating Angoff method to make sure all the questions.
Yeah, we are able to determine the difficulty of the questions and therefore adjust the passing score so that it's equivalent from year to year. Okay. The second exam is the OSCE, or Objective Structured Clinical Exam. It's again a one-day exam, and it's normally 108 extended match or short answer questions. And I'll explain what extended match and short answer, the prescription questions. These questions are all clinically applied, and they're at the judgment and application level only, which means they're higher level questions. Again, they're constructed by educators, and it's interesting, the way we ask the educators to do is we say, we want you to think about the new grad who's sort of just ready to graduate, and compare that person to someone who's not ready to graduate. So there's a fine line between ready to graduate and not ready to graduate. And we want them to think about, what does the student who's ready to graduate know in their specialty area that the one who's not ready to graduate doesn't know? And those are called critical abilities and microjudgments. So we actually try to have them think about those two students as we're writing the questions. The questions then go into the question bank, and they're selected again by general dentists. The 108 questions that we use are all frameworks. And actually, I'll go back a little bit first. This is a sample of a question that is a framework. You can see there's a radiograph. There is some caries in different spots in the radiograph. And the question is to identify where there is caries. This question, you'll see how the answer key works. The experts have said there's definitely caries on the distal of 2.4 and 2.5. If someone doesn't see that, they're not safe to practice. They've said there's definitely no caries on 4 of these surfaces, and if someone says there's caries there, they're definitely not safe for practice. There are some areas where the experts are saying it's likely not caries, but it's not dangerous. So those are 0 rated and do not affect positively or negatively the students or the candidate's score. Any questions about that? So that's a multiple right answer. There are also a number of stations that have models or typodonts. And you can see that this one's got it is a micro judgment. It's getting down into the level of detail of a micro judgment. And in this case, there's only one right answer, although there could be one or more. And you have to get answer I, which is extend the distal lingual wall lingually. It's very obvious. You can actually see it in the picture that the distal wall is still lingual wall is still in contact with the distal tooth. The other ones are actually negative ones, or there could be some zeros where the experts have said, well, you could say that, but that's not the important part. A lot of the questions are involving case histories, patient histories. The patient histories are in exactly the same format whenever they're used. So it'll be easy for students to be able to go in and say, what are the important parts of this areas, and it's not in a written paragraph format. And then you'll see that this question is a single, even though there are a lot of possible answers, it says at the top, select one correct answer. So the one correct answer in this case would have been D. This is an old question. We don't ask that one anymore, but it's a good example. We, again, don't use this one, but it was one of my favorites. This one is select one or more correct answers, and it's how to turn on the emergency oxygen tank. It used to be that everybody had tanks that looked something like this, and the answer was you have to turn on A and E. And you got -1, particularly if you turn the crank that actually had the bottle of oxygen fall off, because that doesn't help. We have models with partial dentures, and this one has 3 correct answers. There's one that's deemed the most important and most obvious, 2 that are still right, and a number that are incorrect. The last type of question we have on the current OSCE is we call it a constructed response or short answer. There's a case history, and it asks the candidate to write a prescription. It's either going to be for an antibiotic or an analgesic. The yellow prescription forms you can see here, you take one of those, write it out, and you actually deposit it in the ballot box. And then it is graded by examiners later. And there are 2 stations with prescriptions. The OSCE is usually set up ideally in a preclinical lab, but it can be set up in a clinic. The stations have between 3 and maybe 7 pages. Most of them have 2 questions. The prescription just has 1 question. All the necessary components are provided, and so you have 5 minutes at each station to answer the 2 questions. It's set up sequentially, and after 5 minutes, a buzzer goes, and you move to the next station and have 5 minutes there. The stations are constructed so that there should not be a time issue. Most candidates are finished a station within 2 to 3 minutes, so it actually gets a little tiresome because you're sitting around quite a bit. But some of the stations might need as much as 4 minutes plus some review time, so we do give 5 minutes so that no one is rushed. The resources, and this is on once you've registered and applied and registered, you get an online profile, and the resources for the examination you've registered for are posted on the online profile, and you can download them so that you have them, and you really do need to download the protocols, and please read the protocols well in advance. There are the rules and regulations, and there are some differences this year. So we want you to take a careful read on the protocols. There are also study resources on the regular NDEB website. There is the released question bank, which has in excess of 3,000 released written exam type questions. There are the OSCE question and answer framework. So of the 108 questions on the OSCE, all of the questions are based on the question and answer frameworks. There will be no surprises. If you see and go through the question and answer frameworks, you will know exactly what will be on the OSCE exam. The other parts here are not relevant for you. So I'm just going to go back. And that's the section I have on the written and OSCE. Are there questions on the written and OSCE exams?
I did have one. Do you recommend any other resources for students to prepare, or do you find that this amount of resources, if properly reviewed, would be sufficient preparation in addition to all the dental school education that we receive?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer because everybody prepares differently and everybody's learning style is different. A lot of students have relayed that going through the release questions to get an idea of the format and some of the content has allowed them to identify where they have strengths and weaknesses. And then they go back when they decide I'll use pharmacology and therapeutics as an example. If they go back and say, boy, I really didn't know as much pharmacology and therapeutics as I think I should, they then go back to their study guides from when they were taking those. So I think it's a blend for people. I don't think it's wise to go into either of these exams without studying. It's an important thing to prepare. They're meant to be reasonable exams, but they are by definition somewhat challenging. Does that answer your question?
I also had a question about release questions. I've talked to a lot of past year students who've taken the exam, and a lot of them suggested to split the questions because there's like 400 pages, to split it among a lot of people, and then for each person to do a part of it and find the answers to all of them. And I thought that it was a very time-consuming thing to do, especially if you're only 4 people, for example, you have to go through 100 pages of questions and make sure each answer is right for your friends. So I was wondering if the FCDSA started an initiative of gathering the answers to the release question bank. Would that be something that's illegal or not allowed?
No, it's a good question. The reason we've released our written exam bank was, and we did it back in 2008, 2009, it was for fairness reasons. Students particularly at some of the larger dental schools were very actively memorizing and reconstructing the questions after the exam. And it became a fairness problem because some of our candidates had access to, they weren't the greatest reconstructions, but they had access to reconstructed questions, and some people didn't, so it wasn't fair. In addition, we really got concerned and actually pursued it where people were selling our reconstructed questions or using the reconstructed questions in recruiting for membership in organizations such as dental fraternities. So they were actually getting financial advantage from our intellectual property. So we've and this is very unusual for a high stakes exam board to release questions, but we felt we had to for fairness reasons. The questions, as you can understand, by releasing, it's caused us to have to write inordinate amounts of questions and be somewhat creative with the OSCE frameworks. So we still have copyright, and in the release questions, when you download them in the paragraph, it says we have copyright on them, and they're intended for the personal use of candidates. Now, we would expect that personal use of the questions involves looking at them on your own and looking at them in small groups, so that you would, as you would for studying, that it would be, we would be very concerned if an organization or a group of individuals start photocopying and emailing and posting large groups of questions. So that's not something we'd be very happy with. Is that? And I'm also going to tell you, I don't think it's a good idea because those questions are, some of them are questions that are outdated. I mean, we've released everything. We didn't release just the ones that we've used. We've released everything. We're in the process of going through and making sure that the questions are as least ambiguous as possible and that the French translations are accurate, because in some cases, the French translations have not been worked on for quite a while. And really, the questions could be used to identify areas of weakness and just to practice with, as opposed to somebody memorizing. You can't memorize 3,000 questions anyway, so I'm not sure that it's a value-added thing for your organization. Okay? Mm-hmm. But I understand why you want to do it. Could be pressure on it as an organization.
Could I add that Dr. Giroux mentioned that all the written questions are single answer. It's possible that the released questions have questions that are not single answer questions. So mm-hmm. Those ones would be old questions that you may not want to spend too much time on.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's obvious that we're using a type of question that's single answer, and there is a form that used to be used, which is called a K-type. It's A, B, C, D, E, or I, and then which of the following, and that's not a format that we're using. So, but it still gives an idea of content, so it was still worth releasing. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Those are good questions. Just a quick review of the results of the certification process. So the written and OSCE exams. The written exam, as you can see, there's a lot more candidates taking the written exam than there was in 2010. And I'm going to explain that a little bit later, but it's safe to say that it's a combination of several factors, including the equivalency process. The pass rate has actually been fairly stable with a little bit of an anomaly in the last few years. And I know that we do get questions about pass rates. And I guess what I'd like to assure you is that we do look at the pass rate for graduates of Canadian programs, and it's still pretty steady in the 96 to 97%. So, and it has been steady for the past while. We've had some aberrations in pass rates with some other groups of candidates, particularly from the University of Minnesota, who felt that our exam was and they did it for the right reasons. They felt that our exam was a good capstone exam for their 4-year program. So they actually required all of their students to take our exam in order to graduate, but they didn't require all our students to pass our exam in order to graduate. They had a supplemental that was not our exam. So the pass rates at the University of Minnesota were significantly different, and in the past couple of years have added to that. So we're actually looking at publishing pass rates for graduates of Canadian programs and pass rates for graduates of other programs. But the Minnesota experiment has been, it's actually finished now, so this may all kind of disappear. Does that make sense?
Yep.
The OSCE is similar. The pass rate for graduates Canadian programs is somewhere in the 98% range. There has been a little bit of variation in the last 2 years, primarily due to Minnesota. I will say that we have done a standard setting for the OSCE, but it had very little effect on graduates of Canadian programs. I would say less than 1%.
Sorry, just to jump in, internet connection wasn't good enough, so I just wanted to confirm again. So in terms of passing grades, number of Canadian trained dental students, in terms of passing rates, been pretty much stable. It's just that people, especially from the States, that's been influencing that. Okay.
Yeah, and Cash, we haven't we know about Minnesota. We haven't analyzed Australia, Ireland,
right?
But there may be some contributions from graduates. So what we're doing now is saying that graduates of the Canadian dental programs are our reference group, and that may be what we report as pass rates, because obviously graduates of Canadian programs are very motivated to pass these exams and would generally prepare as if they are an incredibly high stakes exam, where graduates from other programs may say, oh, I'll try it and see how I do. So it's a different, and from other board exams, particularly in the US, they do look at US and Canada as this reference group and kind of don't report graduates from other programs. So we're working on that and don't quite have the analysis done yet.
Yeah, that sounds good, because a lot of I know from my classmates, especially, like a lot of people were like kind of like worried because they thought since the passing grade is now like 75%, even though that's like equated type of thing, and the passing rates have gone down, they kind of thought maybe things got harder or something like that. But this clarifies a lot of it. Yeah.
No, our on the written exam, the passing standard is exactly the same as it's been for 5 or 6 years. The OSCE it was updated slightly, but it hasn't.
That's good.
Good questions. Yeah. The NDEB also, as you're aware, has the equivalency process for graduates of non-accredited programs. And I'm going to go through the steps in the process because it is very different, and it's important that people understand why it's different. There's an online application process which looks very similar to the graduates of accredited program. It's in the same website. But the biggest difference is for graduates of accredited programs, the credential verification is done through the dean's offices, and we are through accreditation, and we're very confident in our back checks with the dean's office. So you will actually not know that we do credential verification for graduates of accredited programs, because we have a system set up to make sure that we have the right people taking the exams. For the rest of the world, we know nothing about the dental programs that they've gone through, and we are aware of some fraudulent documents. So we have an in-depth credential verification. It involves a back check with the university, and we have contacts with thousands of universities around the world. The assessments are 3 assessments over 4 days. And successful completion of the equivalency process means that a graduate of a non-accredited program is equivalent to the graduate of a Canadian program. So that's why the name equivalency process. We started the equivalency process. We opened applications in 2010, and our expectation was we have between 200 and 300 people apply. We ended up with 1,300 people in the first year, and you'll see that the applications have leveled off, but they've actually started to go back up slightly in 2015 and 2016. And we will have the final 2016 numbers soon, but it will be closer to 1,200, I think, between 11 and 1,200. So there are over 8,000 internationally trained dentists from non-accredited programs in the equivalency process. And these numbers are people that have actually paid the application fee. They may not have gone through with a credential verification, but they have paid the fee. The application fee is $950. It's paid online, and that's it's for application and credential verification. There's a very defined list of required documents that we verify. They have to be submitted by the the applicant and by the dental school, and we do independently confirm that. We have a number of people who actually apply, and we're not sure what the reason is, but they don't follow through with the credential verification. The first step in the equivalency process is the fundamental knowledge exam, and it looks in format similar to the written exam, but it's a very different blueprint. So it's testing different areas of dentistry. It's $800, which is similar to the written exam. We administer it twice a year, in February and August, and we use it multiple sites in Canada. We administer once a year in the United Kingdom. We have an agreement with New Zealand where they actually use our equivalency process for licensure. So we administer in New Zealand twice a year and in Hong Kong once a year. It's used as the admission test for degree completion programs, or if someone passes, then they can move on and take the other assessments. The sample question, it's a single right answer. It looks similar format to the written exam. Candidates or participants who successfully complete the fundamental knowledge exam can apply to degree completion programs, and that is still what is recommended. That is the most predictable method to becoming a successful dentist in Canada, is the degree completion programs. But there is the option of going through the rest of the assessments, and the clinical judgment is a one-day booklet, 3 booklets, case-based examine or assessment, and it has extended match questions similar to the OSCE. But it's not an OSCE, it's not a station exam. It costs $1,500. It's administered twice a year in June and December, and we administer it in the sites where the clinical skills exam is going to be. The clinical skills exam is a 2-day exam, and it's on mannequins or typodonts or dentiforms, as some people say. There are 12 requirements. It's $5,500, and unfortunately, we are not covering costs, so this fee is going to be going up over the next few years. It's administered in June and December in Canadian faculties and at the University of Otago in New Zealand. The passing standard for this it's done through a scoring grid, so you have to get a certain number of passes or marginal, not marginal failures, but correctable failures to pass this skills. This is the typodont that we're using. We use the same typodont in all the test centers, and at this time we're using the Kilgore 200 series typodont, which is used by many schools in Canada. The requirements that are performed for the ACS are listed on the screen. You'll see that they tend to be restorative. There's one endodontic requirement. There is record keeping and an infection control observation requirement. So it's an extensive exam. The results of the equivalency process, these are the results for 2011 to 2015. We'll get 2016 in the next couple weeks. In 2011, as the first year, you can see we had about 123 get through, including people graduating from the qualifying programs. In 2015, we've had 270 complete the equivalency process, about the same, a little bit more in the degree completion program. So there were actually a total of 359 declared or reached equivalency with Canadian graduates. When I speak to governments, and we have to do this a lot because government is, both provincial and federal, are very interested and involved in licensing and certifying international graduates or immigrants who have come to Canada and who have credentials in another jurisdiction from where they came from. So they ask to give the context of how things are working. And they're really mostly interested in numbers and in process. So this is what I try to explain to the governments and to other organizations such as yours. In Canada, everyone, of course, you know, there are 10 dental schools. We're actually a pretty small country population-wise, and we have a fairly significant number of dental schools, particularly in Quebec, where there are 3 dental schools. Our dental schools, when you look and compare them to the US or compare them to Europe or the rest of the world, our schools are extremely small. The largest school in the US produces almost as many graduates as all 10 schools in Canada. So we are a small school, and that makes it very difficult for our schools to survive in universities doing teaching, service, and research, because we just don't have the students to have the faculty members to do all of those requirements for a university faculty. So it's a challenge for dentistry in Canada. In 2010 and before, this is kind of an average, but it was fairly stable. There were normally about 615 to 620 new dentists licensed in Canada a year. And they were coming primarily from the traditional 4 or 5 year Canadian DDS DMD program. There were a significant number from the US, approximately 100 per year. And the qualifying degree completion programs were around 65 prior to 2010. This has changed dramatically in the last 6 years. The red bar is the number of graduates of Canadian traditional programs. There has been very little change. It's pretty stable. The qualifying degree completion program is the gray bar, and you can see it's gone up a little bit, but it's pretty stable as well. Graduates from US and Australia have consistently or are going up and have gone up into the 200s now. But the one that's really increased is the equivalency process, which didn't exist in 2010, but has very gradually gone up. In 2014, we had to change the way we were reporting. So 2014 is it's just a reporting statistical aberration, but it's actually continuing to go up. So these are the latest numbers that we have, and I'm going to have Kim actually check these. I'm thinking these numbers together are right. We may have a couple people that actually did degree completion programs included in the 4 or 5 year, but it's still the same pattern. So Canadian DDS traditional programs are fairly similar if you put those numbers together. Australia and New Zealand and the US, we're well over 200 now. It does go up and down a little bit. And the equivalency process, we're in the 250 range, people getting certified out of that. So we've gone from about 615 to just over 1,000 over a 5 year period. So that's a pretty dramatic increase. Sorry, I'll just get rid of my phone. It's not my cell phone, it's actually my landline. So it's a big change. So I'm sure we must have some questions before we move on to future directions.
Yeah. So I was actually just wondering, is there, does NDEB or any other organization, maybe government, decide how many foreign trained dentists can actually enter the Canadian system? Is there such quota restriction, or not really?
No, the approach to government, sorry, it's my wife calling. I will just tell her she has to call back. My apologies, my wife's in Vancouver. I told her I had a video conference.
Of course.
So the question is does human resource planning for dentistry enter in, or does anybody in government or regulatory authorities look at numbers of dentists and have quotas? The answer is that government and the regulatory authorities do not feel that that is part of their mandate. In fact, governments have told regulatory authorities, including the NDEB, that is not our mandate. The government has lots of examples. You may have friends who've gone through teachers college or teacher training, and there seems to be an excess of teachers produced each year, which the government is funding the education for. There are more lawyers produced than apparently that needed in the legal profession. So government is actually not interested in quotas, and I don't see that changes. That change is going to. I don't think that's going to change, and it's probably the correct thing. The government feels that dentists are one of the self-regulating professions, and in some ways it is market-driven. So if there are more dentists in some areas, the market will look after that, and it's not the government that or the regulatory board's business to do that.
All right.
Although it may be unsettling for students who are graduating with large debt, but it is the way it is.
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
No, that's it.
The future directions are a number that we're working on, but the one that is most likely not to affect anyone who's in the town hall with us today, but possibly in 2020 or within a year or two from then. And it's something that Dr. Dagenet is really working with her group on. The virtual OSCE is scheduled for 2020 to replace both the written and OSCE exam. And it is going to be a digital exam and administered on a computer. So it will be an OSCE format in that it will be case-based and very clinically oriented. It will have a number of clinical decisions to make. And but we have determined that we will be able to administer it without using models. We're going to be using very high cognitive level. This is something called Bloom's taxonomy. So we're not going to be using the just I remember, I understand type. It will be much higher level. There will be 3 types of questions on the virtual OSCE. The first type will be the one that's probably the most frequent, and it will be frameworks similar to the OSCE, current OSCE. There will be up to 15 possible alternatives, 1 or more correct answers. These frameworks will, the majority of them at least, will be on the website, so the candidates know the content areas and the questions and answers. The second type of question, and I'll show an example, but are ones that we call clonable questions. They will be single right answer multiple choice questions, but to minimize or prevent reconstruction, they are clonable, and I'll explain that in a minute. And there will be more constructed response questions. The prescriptions are the only constructed response at the moment, but there will be the ability to do a number of short answer questions where the candidate will have to type the answer into the computer. So the framework looks similar to an OSCE, and when we're actually doing the frameworks, we can have unlimited numbers of possible distractors, but we're only going to use the ones that are actually appropriate or somewhat plausible for the case. So that's similar to the OSCE. This is an example of a single right answer question that's clonable. So the question may look very similar from year to year, but if students actually or candidates actually steal the question by reconstructing the question, they may think that it's the same question, but it may have some small difference which will actually change the answer to the question. So it will make it so that memorizing the single right answer questions will not be an effective exam strategy. Does that make sense? Are there questions on a clonable? No?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And constructed response is basically a fill in the blank question. And there will be some marked by by examiners, and there will eventually be some marked by computer algorithms that we have to decide on what spellings we'll accept and all that sort of thing. That has not been provided. Which with each of the virtual OSCE questions, there will be digital links. There will be case histories that you can hit and pop up with the case history. There's the 3D models that will be manipulatable. Photographs and radiographs similar to the OSCE, but the radiographs, we know, is one of the reasons we're going digital is so that we could really make use of digital radiography and not have to produce an analog version of it. There'll be charts and there will be video. At the current time, we're not putting sound in with the videos. It's possible in the future, but not in the first stage of the OSCE. So we're very excited about it, and we've got the questions and the frameworks. We're quite advanced. We are still working on the delivery mechanism to see what's the most reliable, so that we don't run into Wi-Fi or internet problems. We want to make sure this works when we do it. So those are the things that are coming. And I think it's the end of my presentation, so we're looking forward to more questions, answers, and discussions.
Thank you very much. Just a question about the virtual OSCE. Do you know if, because I assume since we're changing platforms and the way we do things, do you know if students will get a chance to do like mock OSCE exams, like on electronic devices, before they actually take the actual OSCE exam in the future?
Yes, it's very important. When we're doing a change in format, particularly to a digital, we don't want to have exam error caused by someone who's not familiar with the platform and the delivery platform. So the plan, and I'm sure that this will be implemented, is that prior to having a registration confirmed for the virtual OSCE, all candidates will actually have to take a simulated virtual OSCE in advance before they can actually register. And they'll be able to go back and take that a number of times. We're assuming at our working assumption at this stage is that the OSCE will be done on an iPad. And so when you register, you will have to use a computer, not a handheld device, and it would make your computer into an iPad, and then you would work through it the same way you would on your iPad. Am I correct, Dr. Dagenet?
Yes, correct. Yeah. And the exam that the students would have to take would demonstrate all the functionalities of the exam, all the different types of questions.
The orientation exam. Yeah.
Gotcha. I think Nada has a question.
Yeah. Was there any other techniques that the students in future years could prepare for a more virtual experience for the exam? It's not common that we write electronic-based exams in dental school. So for those, I mean, it is years out, but for those who are now in first year and perhaps incoming students for next year, if there's anything they could do throughout the course of dental school that could prepare them for that type of exam?
Dr. Dagenet, do you want to?
I can say that when I was at McGill University, all the examinations were electronic, and I think it's still like that. And the transition has been extremely easy. The students have had no problems whatsoever switching for paper exam to electronic exam. And in terms of the questions that are associated with an image, the electronic exam is actually an advantage. The FCDSA ran a student survey last year, and many comments were that we should really convert to electronic for the radiographs and the imaging. I don't think it will be a challenge for the students. I think it will be an advantage.
I do think that I can tell you that part of our testing plan is beta testing at all the university sites, and that will likely involve faculty and students who've already taken our written and OSCE before, so that we'll be getting feedback from them. But that also provides information to the universities so that they will be able to answer questions on how it works. And but I do think it's going to be the orientation exam that'll be, because it should be, and we're trying to make the user interface. We're working hard on the user interface, and we will have new graduates trying out the user interface so that we're so that it's intuitive, that you press on an icon for the patient history, you press on one for the radiograph. If you want to expand the radiograph, it's what you would use on a digital radiography screen. But we are concerned about it, so we'll look for help on it too. But we're not to the point where we can actually try it out yet.
And I have one more question. So how long does it take for NDEB to process exams and get the results back to candidates? And the reason I ask because some students might be considering taking the exam in May, and and if so, can they still graduate in time? Let's say for the convocation in June.
The NDEB results actually don't affect convocation.
Right.
So the schools don't even know the results of the NDEB exam unless the student tells them. So it doesn't affect convocation. What it does affect is licensure. And we're very aware that a lot, especially in Quebec, there's a lot of general practice residency programs that people need their license by the 1st of July. Our exam is the last weekend in May, I think. It's the weekend after the Victoria Day long weekend. We really try, and we've been successful in the last few years to get the results of the May exam out sort of the last week of June. It normally takes us 6 weeks to get through all of the post-exam analysis and checks, because we don't want to make mistakes. But so for the March exam and the November exam, it is 6 weeks that it takes. And of course, the March exam is a huge exam, so we have to really do a lot of statistical checks on it. The May exam, we have a system where it's our intent to get the marks out before the end of June.
Wow.
I had one more question.
Sure.
We did do the survey to all the fourth year students last year, and we were wondering if it would be okay with you if you share it with all the dental students.
It's your survey.
Yeah. So so that maybe it becomes an annual thing that we do every year to all the fourth year students, so we gather what fourth year students' experiences were like to prepare the other dental students.
As we said last year, we are actually in the process of developing a post-administration survey, and Kim's in charge of coordinating that. So Kim, we've got the survey drafted. Right?
The survey, the English version of the survey is complete, and it will be going to the exam committee in the spring, and hopefully we'll be able to have it administered after one of the sessions this year, so either in May or November as the pilot.
So it may, and if there are questions on it that if some of your questions are not on it, we would take your input to see. We've tried to make it so the questions are going to allow us to make changes on it. So there may be some that you ask that just aren't going to help us, but the rest are. And I guess the two things that you should know that were in your survey and we were working on, one is the digital production of radiographs, which is the virtual OSCE. The second one, we have made a change on washroom policies and water. And if you can help us get that information out to your individuals. It used to be that you could only take a restroom break if you had a medical problem and had a doctor's note, and then we made arrangements to have extra invigilators. We've now, for the written exam, have made sure we have enough invigilators for male, female, and we will be able to manage some restroom breaks, not thousands, but there will be one restroom break at a time being able to manage. And so people don't have to write for permission. And generally, when people had permission, they didn't use the restroom break anyway, because most graduate Canadian schools, the written exam's 2.5 hours long, but the vast majority are done in about 75 to 90 minutes. So it's not that big a deal for restroom breaks. It tends to be more in our equivalency process where we get into the 3 hour and people are still working hard at 3 hours that we have a problem. On the OSCE exam, it's very difficult to do restroom breaks, but we have got it arranged so that if someone really needs a restroom break, it can be administered while they're at a rest station. There are rest stations in the OSCE, and someone will escort them out at a rest station. Hopefully they make it back within 5 minutes and continue on. If they don't, they will have to continue on where they left off, and some arrangements made to make up the one station afterwards. But hopefully that won't happen very often. So those things have been changed. The other one is a difficult one, but we're going to try. We're going to allow candidates to bring disposable clear plastic bottles of water into the exam. And if you can please get across that it has to be like the flexible plastic disposable. It can't be clear, hard, reusable ones with filters in and things. And the reasons for that is there's a lot of documentation of crib notes and notes being written in so they can be magnified through the water. So we're using just flexible disposable water. It'll have to be stored under the desk so we don't have things spilled, but we'll give it a try. For the OSCE exam, I think we actually have water at the rest stations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Dr. Gashny, or yes?
Thank you. That'd be very, many people will be very happy about that.
So we did react, or not react, but take your survey into account.
And this is all in the protocol, and it's another reason why it's important to read everything in the protocol.
Yeah. But we're very concerned that we're going to have a number of non-disposable water bottles show up. And that's just
and they will be refused.
Yeah, they won't be allowed. We won't throw them out, but they won't be allowed in. So.
Sure. Well, I guess, is there any questions you just want to ask? No? So I guess that's it. Well, thank you again. Thank you very much. It was a very informative session. I personally learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure a lot of students will find it very useful. And we'll be essentially sharing this information with dental students on our website and Facebook. And so that's where students can.
Well, I thought we were going to post it. I thought we'd agreed that we were going to post it on the NDEB site.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
So that we could control the posting.
Exactly. And
when people work with us, so that when we're editing, that we do just get a chance on a final edit.
Exactly. And so that would be definitely coordinated with you guys. But yeah, that's it. Again, Claude.
Thanks very much, guys. Have a good Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.